A lot of veterans hear the phrase protected rating and think it means one thing: the VA can never touch it again. That is not how these rules work. Not because veterans are wrong to want that peace of mind, not because they misunderstood on purpose, but because the VA actually has three separate protections: the 5 year rule, the 10-year rule, and the 20-year rule. And each one protects something different. Confuse them, and you might ignore a letter you should have answered. Or worse, you might assume a rating is safer than it actually is. In this video, I'm going to break down exactly what each rule protects, what it does not protect, and how to check where your own rating stands. Here's what we're covering: what the 5 year rule actually protects, what the 10-year rule actually protects, what the 20-year rule actually protects, and how to check where each of your own conditions falls on that timeline. By the end, you'll be able to read any VIA letter with more clarity, not more fear. Here's the trap: veterans hear 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, or P and T, and the brain files all of it under one word: safe. That's the mistaken belief we need to clear up today. Not because you weren't paying attention, not because you did anything wrong. The VA just doesn't hand veterans a plain English map of what each of these protections actually does. So let's build that map together. Let's start with the one veterans hear about most: the 5 year rule. Here's the plain English version. Once a rating has been in place for 5 years or more, the VA generally has to be more careful before reducing it. That does not mean the rating is untouchable. Here's what it actually means: the 5 year rule gives stabilized ratings stronger protection against reduction. The VA generally needs to review the full record and show sustained material improvement, not rely on one incomplete snapshot or one good day. That matters. Think about it this way: say you've had a 50% rating for your back for 6 years. If the VA sends you in for one C and P exam, and on that one day your back happens to be having a decent stretch, that single exam should not be enough on its own to override 6 years of medical history. The VA is supposed to look at the whole picture: your treatment records, your flare ups, the pattern over time, not just one appointment. That is the terrain. But here's where veterans lose ground: they hear stabilized and translate it in their head to permanent. It's not the same word. If the full record genuinely shows sustained improvement, the VA can still move to reduce, even with the 5 year rule in place. The 5 year rule raises the bar, it does not remove it. Now let's talk about the 10-year rule, because this is the one veterans misunderstand the most. A lot of veterans think, I've been service connected for this condition for over 10 years, so my percentage is locked in. That is not what the 10-year rule protects. Here's the plain English version: the 10-year rule protects service connection itself, not the percentage. Say that again because it matters: service connection, not the number. Once a condition has been service connected for 10 years or more, the VA generally cannot sever that connection completely, meaning they can't just decide it's no longer a service connected condition and wipe it off your record. Not without something serious like fraud or a real question about whether you had the qualifying service to begin with. But, and this is the part that trips people up, the percentage itself can still move up or down if the medical evidence supports it. Service connection and rating percentage are two different things. The 10-year rule protects one of them, not both. That is where veterans lose ground. They feel safe about the wrong thing. Now, the one most veterans are actually hoping for when they say, my rating is protected: the 20-year rule. Here's the plain English version: if a disability has been continuously rated at or above a certain level for 20 years or more, the VA generally cannot reduce it below that level, except in a case like fraud. This one protects the floor. Here's what that looks like in real life. Say your knee was rated at 30% back in 2004. Over the years, it moved up to 50%, back down to 40%, up to 50% again, but it never dropped below 30% the whole time. By 2024, that 20-year clock has run. Your floor is 30%. If that 30% level has been continuously protected for 20 years, VA generally cannot take you below that level, even if a future exam shows improvement, except in a case like fraud. That is the strongest of the three. But notice what it still does not do: it protects a floor, not the highest number you ever reached. The protected floor depends on the level that has actually been continuously in place for that 20-year period, and it's measured condition by condition based on the effective date of that specific rating. Not your first day in the VA system, not the day you filed your very first claim. So here's the full picture side by side. The 5-year rule: the VA needs to show real, sustained improvement across the whole record before touching a stabilized rating. The 10-year rule, your service connection is protected from severance, not your percentage. The 20-year rule, your rating cannot drop below its lowest point during those 20 years, except for fraud. Three different protections, three different things they actually protect. And one more thing veterans need to hear. If you have a permanent and total rating, that is strong. But P and T does not mean you stop reading VA letters. It does not mean every envelope goes in a drawer without a second look. Read the letter every time. That is the mission. Not fear, just clarity. Here's the part most veterans miss completely. Every one of these clocks starts on its own effective date. If you have 5 service-connected conditions, you could have 5 completely different timelines running. One condition might be past the 20-year floor. Another might only be 3 years old. Your combined rating does not automatically inherit the strongest protection just because one piece of it is old. That sounds small. It is not. Do not assume your whole rating is protected just because one condition has been on the books for decades. Check each one, know the condition, the rating level, and the effective date. That is how you actually know where you stand. Here's your 48-hour challenge. Pull your VA rating decision, the one that lists each of your service-connected conditions. For each one, write down 2 things, the effective date and the current rating level. Then ask yourself which protection tier that condition is actually in. Under 5 years, past 5, past 10, or past 20. This is not about guessing. It's about knowing your own timeline so you can read any future letter with clarity instead of panic. Let's bring it all together. Protected does not mean the same thing at every stage. The 5-year rule raises the VA's burden of proof. The 10-year rule protects service connection, not percentage. The 20-year rule protects the lowest rating level continuously held for 20 or more years. And every one of these clocks runs on its own effective date, condition by condition. In the next rating protection briefing, we're going to talk through the other side of this conversation, how to think clearly about filing for an increase when you already have a strong rating without assuming it puts everything else at risk. Before you file, appeal, or request an increase, start with the free VA claim readiness resources at veteranclaimsmadeeasy.com/resources. Get organized first. Understand what the VA is looking for and move forward with more clarity. My goal is never to mislead, only to empower you with accurate, honest, and actionable information. Semper Fidelis, and God bless.